Yeah, well, let's dig in. Hello, everybody. I'm David Cooks, and I tell you what, we know that paralysis can take on many forms. It can be physical like mine, or it can be psychological. You put your mind to. And what we try to do is feature stories that go from difficult places to fulfilling purpose. What seems impossible can be done by you. He is an assistant coach at Hargrave Military Academy. He also coaches the Upward Stars, an AAU program. It may knock you down, but don't let it stop you. His journey's amazing. He does it in spite of challenges, just like I did it for years. And, I think his story is going to touch a lot of people today.
Growing up a little person, you're already wired to think things differently in a world that's not made for you. An average person goes up to a chair and they don't think, they just turn and sit. A little person goes up and they think, all right, do I need to hold on to the table? Do I need to turn and climb up in the chair forward and then turn around and sit down? How do you get from your chair to your bed? I would dive first in the bed and do a roll. That's how I got into my bed. And the therapist, I would shock them the heck out of them. But they finally were like, you know what? This is what's easy for you. And what I did was, and they would tell you, as I caused those therapists to have to think differently. Got so much to give, a lot of life to live. You must go from paralysis to purpose. Get your pen and paper out. Yeah, I'm taking notes. Paralysis to purpose. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast. I'm your host, David Cooks. And before I introduce our guest, let me first of all thank you for taking the time to listen to our podcast. Thank you for leaving a review. A 5-star review is great. I love what I do because I get to speak with some of the most intriguing and inspiring people on the planet. Today is no exception. He is an assistant coach at Hargrave Military Academy down in Virginia. He also coaches the Upward Stars, which is an AAU program in the summer. I came across him, has it been a couple of years ago now? If I remember correctly. And I think he reached out to me on social media and we started talking about basketball and some other things and some of the common loves that we have. And recently I'm like, you know what? I need to get him on the podcast so we can share his story. His journey's amazing. He does it in spite of challenges, just like I did it for years. And, I think his story is going to touch a lot of people today. So David Bentley is joining us today. And David, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast. Well, Coach, if I can still call you Coach, I think when we're coaches, right, we kind of don't ever lose the mantra. So if I can still call you Coach, Coach, I appreciate you having me on. And, like you said, when we first connected over to social media a couple of years back, I learned about your journey and everything. And when you were gracious enough to ask me to be on your podcast, I was more than humbled. So pumped, excited, nervous, all the above to be with you on your thing today.
Well, we finally got it done, and you sound like a coach. So, it's funny. I used to sound like you when I was like in it. And now I'm listening to you. I'm like, man, this is like a coach for real. He's got the coach voice. He's got the coach language, the swag. And absolutely, you can call me Coach. I think that's one of the great things about being a coach and being someone that can impact people's lives is that to the people that you've worked with, you're always coach to them. I don't care what your next journey is or what you've been, they're going to always refer to you as coach. And that's a great term of endearment. So I accept that. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
But I'm not coaching right now. Well, I'm doing other kind of coaching.
A different kind of coaching.
Yeah, not athletics. Hey, let's go back to Greer High School. That's where you were in high school, and a little bit about your background. And I want you to share a little bit about who you are, where you're from, your family, and then we're going to really get into your love for sports. And one of the things that I say often is that obstacles don't redefine you, they redirect you. And if you allow them to, they can refine you. And I think that's some of what you've done. And we're going to cover that today on the podcast. But who are you? Where are you from?
So obviously, yeah, I'm David Bentley. I was born in Winter Haven, Florida. I lived there for the first 2 years of my life, so I don't really remember much about it. People ask me, what'd you like about Florida? I was 0 to 2, so I don't really remember anything. Then my family moved to Northern Virginia, about an hour outside of Washington. And that was where I spent most of my childhood, elementary years. And obviously, as you
can't see on the podcast, but I have achondroplasia dwarfism, and was obviously born like that. And growing up though, I never really let that hinder me from doing anything, having friends, playing sports, and doing all the things that normal, going on the playground, jumping off of the house, and going to hide in the tunnels and all that stuff that kids back then. I don't know if kids do that anymore these days, but back then we did. And sports was always, I don't know why, I'd always been a competitor. I think the ability to want to compete and make everything in competition was always in me. So obviously the natural outlet for that is sports. And growing up, I played baseball. I played Saturday morning church basketball. And baseball, growing up in my early years, elementary years, baseball was my favorite, just because it's probably the one sport where the height part doesn't come into play as much. I think you can, play a position, and your height and whatnot doesn't impact you as much as maybe a basketball, football, or something else. So obviously I love baseball. And then, during my dad worked for the airlines at Dulles Airport, and the summer after my 5th grade year, he got transferred to Greenville Spartanburg Airport, and so we moved to Greenville, South Carolina, and that's when I started middle school. And obviously, I've always been a confident guy. My parents instilled in me growing up at an early age, like, God made you like you are for a reason. He doesn't make mistakes, and don't ever let anyone tell you can't do anything or anything like that. And I've always been, a pretty confident person, and I think making friends and everything never came as a challenge. It's just more so the being different part. When you walk into a building and you're different or you stand out in some way, you're obviously going to get the double takes and the pointings and things like that. When we moved down to South Carolina, it was going to starting middle school, different state, didn't know anyone, so I was a little nervous. What are these people gonna like? I had gotten used to a sort of a region of the country, and now I'm moving down, even though it's still in the South. You're still staying in that region. It's different area, different people. You don't know anyone. And so I was a little nervous, but, acclimated pretty quickly, and, got to Greer Middle School, and, did the same things I did, ran for student office, and like I did, played middle school baseball, and even picked up C-team football. And I only played 2 years, but because I have football practices, I don't like football practices. As a one practice, they can have that.
It sounds like your mom and dad were like, "Hey, you are who you are, and you are great, and God made you to be good, and go get it."
Yeah.
And that's fantastic. But then there's always the little intricacies of family and that kind of stuff. What was it like for your sister to see you growing up?
Yeah, she. We obviously had the typical sibling, right? Like we fight about the things that we fought about, and but I think she was always in public. She was always supportive of me, and knew there wasn't going to be any more lack of like, hey, I'm going to have to be his voice per se. Mm-hmm. There wasn't going to be any of that. I was my own voice, but she would be, she would stand up for me if I have to. But in the house, I mean, when we're fighting, she'd put stuff on the top shelf and I wouldn't be able to reach it or something like that. And, or just, hold my head and my short arms wouldn't be able to reach, and, different things like that. And, or run away because, she knew I wouldn't be able to catch her. But
and that right there, that sounds like classic sibling rivalry, regardless of whatever the situation is. That is classic.
Absolutely. So we had all those in our sibling, and she played sports a little bit growing up, but she wasn't too big into the sports thing. But she, I mean, like I said, she was supportive, but we definitely had our battles.
I love it. So you did a couple of things. You talked about having to relocate in fifth grade, and that's difficult for anybody because you had already, you said you had to get all new friends and all that stuff that happens at that age. And at that age, everything is major. Everything is a big deal. You talked about the transition wasn't as bad for you because you left a place where you had grown accustomed to people knew who you were. So they knew what your strengths were, your weaknesses. They knew how to play with you. They know how to do all of that. You step now into an unknown place, new people, new part of the country. Greenfield, South Carolina is not Washington, D.C. And so what was it that stood out to you the most about that transition?
I think the biggest thing was probably the hospitality of the people. I think the hospitality, and I think in that making the adjustment easier, quicker. I think the quickness of the adjustment was the most surprising part to me because I thought this thing's going to take me a full year to acclimate, let people understand, what I'm capable of, who I am, the things I can do, how to talk to me, what they can say, what they can't say, things like that. I thought it was going to take me a full year adjustment of my sixth grade year. We moved the summer after my fifth grade year. So I thought my whole sixth grade year is pretty much essentially going to be a wash because I'm going to be basically having to learn everybody for a year. And I would say within a month or two, I was acclimated. And, I think that, how everybody says, people in the South are hospitable and there's a lot of that. But I think, and obviously this was probably some of the stuff that was ingrained in me through growing up and through my own experiences of sort of living life and playing sports and being confident. And, and obviously I'd learned in church all the time, God made me first. So my thing, I'd always kind of went around with the sense of like, I want to make friends and I want people to accept me, but ultimately, like, my acceptance is already, like, if God made me like I am for a reason and he's okay with me and he approved of me, I'm not really living for the approval of these other people. But don't get me wrong, when I'm middle school age, like, you want that acceptance.
Yes.
You definitely want that acceptance. So, but I think the quickness of the adjustment was what surprised me because I think once people get around me and once people see who I am, I think it kind of sort of wipes away every other aspect of he's just one of us.
Right. So you have the ability. It's interesting. I people can disagree with this, but I often think it's the responsibility of the person who may have a difference of some sort to make others comfortable with him or her so that you can disarm them, so to speak, by who you are and how you present yourself. And then all of a sudden it's easier for them and easier for you to make that connection and have real relationship. So sounds like you did that at an early age.
Oh, absolutely. And just to speak on that point, I kind of don't let me personally, I don't let that aspect. I almost, instead of just kind of letting it come and sort of disarm you, like I'll run to it. Like if I see someone staring in the mall, like I'll roll up to them and say like, "Hey, what's up, man?" And the kid, like, sometimes the kids are like, and it's just, but it breaks that wall down quick of you're either going to talk to me or you're going to stare at a distance, but it ain't going to be no in between.
So the next person that comes along that may look like you or be like you, they won't get the same thing that you got off of your initial interaction.
100%.
And that's great. I think that's servanthood at its highest level, where you're willing to take the hit for somebody else. So when they come after you, they don't have to do that.
Absolutely.
You seem to be pretty good in middle school and grade school. And you get to high school. And is this the first time you start to kind of sense that your height might be an issue with things? Was this the first real, like, I don't know what I can really do. I don't know what I can't do. Explain that high school transition, because that's where I think you begin to find your way as a coach.
But this was the first time where I sort of like sports was starting to, I don't want to say get away from me, but I wasn't able to perform in that outlet. I played middle school baseball, high school baseball. The guys started, becoming a little bit too big, the pitching a little bit too fast, the conditioning a little bit too extreme, and same thing with football. Like I played middle school football. I could, the varsity guys were a little bit too big, and I don't mean too big as in I was scared per se. I just mean physically there's, again, limitations on what you can do,
right?
And they're running in football practice, they're running a suicide for the length of the field. It's basically taking me double that. And the same thing with obviously basketball speaks for itself. Like where have you ever heard of a Muggsy was even 5'4" or 3"? Like I'm a whole foot shorter than Muggsy.
If you don't know who Muggsy Bogues is, 5'3", had an unbelievable NBA career. Spud Webb, some of those other guys. So check that out. Just wanted to make sure because I knew who you were talking about.
Yeah,
but our listeners may not.
Okay.
So you get to this point. How did you reconcile now that there were some things that you just couldn't do? Your parents always said, don't let anyone tell you you can't do anything. Don't let anyone tell you can't be anything. And life will kind of tell you what you can do and what you can't do. How did you reconcile that? What was that any tension or anything like that?
I think the way I did that was, not being able to play the sports. I think it was reconciling of, okay, well, if I'm not going to play, I'm going to find a different way to be around it and have an impact. And if I'm not going to be able to play, let me help someone else be able to play it, or let me help someone else be able to use that sport to make a team, go to college, make money, whatever it looks like. Let me use that sport. And the whole way I got involved with basketball was I was actually a football manager. And, I said, if I'm not going to be able to play, let's find the next best thing. And let's stand on the sidelines or, whether that be football, basketball, whatever. And I was football manager and, coming down south, football's king. And I was looking for something to keep me from the end of football season to spring football. And I had two options. The wrestling coach wanted me to wrestle because I had a low center of gravity. But at that point, I was like, you know what, I'm done with sports. And then I could be the basketball manager. And I kind of didn't leave him a choice back to that whole running to the situation. I went up to the basketball coach. I said, look, I'm going to be your manager. I'll be here on Monday. And I'll see you on Monday at practice. And Monday came and I was at practice. And that relationship through, his name was Coach Jeff Neely, that relationship was the one that inspired me and really got me on the coaching path, because he had an impact on my life through coaching, allowing me to be the manager. And then off the floor, my dad, I talked about my parents, my dad had, reverted back in, he had been an alcoholic at a younger age. Well, at this time, he had reverted back to alcoholism. So, and then my sister was starting to go down the wrong path. She was in high school right behind me as well. And then getting around the wrong crowd. And then my mom has a mental illness, bipolar disorder, and she had moved back to Texas to live with her brother. And so she wasn't in the picture at the time. So it was basically my dad raising my sister and I, and Coach Neely had a profound impact. And he was the one that kind of inspired me to get into the coaching realm.
Wow, man, there's a lot to unpack in all that you said. For our listeners who know my story, I was 15 when I had a spinal aneurysm and began using a wheelchair. And it's a little different when you're born with something versus when you acquire something. And it took me a little bit longer after the adjustment to realize how I could stay involved in the game that I loved. You did that at a very young age. And one of the things that I believe happens when people deal with adversity is that there's a maturity that comes a lot faster with them than others who don't. And man, kudos to you for finding that out at the high school level and stepping into that. And look, I didn't know about the other aspects of your family with the alcoholism and your mom's mental health issues and your sister going down the wrong path. Athletics truly was your lifeline.
Absolutely was. And it's so much that, I would do football and basketball and this, through my high school career. Ended up my senior year, I dropped football and just focused on basketball. And I knew I wanted to go to college doing something with basketball, obviously being a manager. And it, as you said, it was truly my outlet, because if not for that, I don't know where I would be. And I don't, I hate to use sort of that expression sometimes. I hate to know where I'd be. I wouldn't be sitting right here. I don't know if I'd be in the worst situation, but I don't know that I'd be sitting right here, you having me as a guest on your podcast with that sense of impacting lives, coaching the way I am.
I tell you what, this is going to be a great place for us to take a quick break, and then we're going to transition into Anderson College. I believe that's where you went, and you had a great career there as a manager, and you continue to move forward. So we'll talk about that when we come back. And maybe we'll go back and revisit also Coach Jeff Neal, and maybe revisit the impact that he's had on you. At the time, you probably didn't recognize it, and most coaches don't. Most coaches don't even remember things that we have said to kids, right? I mean, you've been there, and then all
Absolutely.
of a sudden they come back and you're like, "I said that to you?"
Yeah, no question.
Okay, okay, I said it. I guess I said
I
it.
guess I said it.
Yeah, so we'll be right back with David Bentley on Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast.
We hope you're enjoying Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Paralysis to Purpose for more updates. Also, check out David's website at davidcookspeaks.com to learn more about his mission and purchase his book, Getting Undressed, From Paralysis to Purpose. Welcome back to Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast. I'm David Cooks, along with our guest, David Bentley. And we're going to pick up when he left high school, and he ended up at Anderson University. He corrected me and said, it used to be Anderson College, but that was a while ago. In other words, he's calling me old and he young. And I got it. So I want to make sure that we get Anderson University right in South Carolina. So you took the same approach in college that you took in high school. You wanted to be a manager. You did. And first of all, how did you choose Anderson College? I mean, Anderson University.
Okay. Yeah. It was actually an interesting story. We had a kid getting recruited at Greer High School, and he was getting recruited by he was, and you'll understand this, he was right on the fringe of Division I, Division II. And there's right on the, in that fringe, and as being a coach in this, the fringe to Division I, Division II can be a wide gap, or it could be very small. And he was kind of a fringe guy. And so he had some Division I's come in, and he had some Division II's come in. And we, one day, and it was the end of the day, the coach from Anderson University, Jason Taylor, comes in, and he's like, I'm here to see the kid work out. And Coach Neely had a class or something. He said, "Hey, I can't take him, Dave, go work him out." And so I take him in the gym and I work him out. And the whole legend goes, I don't know, again, one of those things of, coaches say, did you say, Coach Neely says, Coach Taylor comes up to him after the workout and says, "I don't want the player, I want the manager." And so he says, he comes up to me after and said, "Hey, if you would like to be a manager in college," which Coach Neely says you do, "you can come to Anderson University and be our manager." And at this time, we had a kid a year older than me that was a top 50 kid in the country and highly ranked, and he had been recruited by Clemson. And when he started getting recruited and those coaches would come, I was kind of like his little sidekick. He's 6'10", I'm 4'4", so obviously it was a natural fit. And when these coaches would come start doing it, I was like, "Hey, I want to go wherever you're going. You want to go to the big time ACC? I'm going to big time ACC, and I want to go make the big time." And as God would have it, come to a time to apply for college, and I applied to Clemson. I applied to some other big schools. I also applied to Anderson. Just said, sort of use it as a fallback option. Mm-hmm. Well, that was where Anderson ended up, where I would get the most financial aid and I would have to pay the least coming out on the back end. So I said, you know what, I don't know if this was the first adult decision I ever made, but I'm going to make a wise decision and go to the place that I get the most aid. And I'm going to go to Anderson.
But that's a great story, that you were actually just doing your job and you were actually filling in for the head coach. And the guy was like, the kid that's, I know I came to see the other kid, but this is the kid I like.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever heard that as a story before. I mean, I have been in a situation and had scholarship level kids and non-scholarship level kids that played for me and would work them out for coaches and stuff, or have managers work them out. And I've never, ever had a coach say, oh yeah, we love the kid, but who's the manager?
I don't know if my workout was that great. It might've just been more the impact. I
Yes.
was about to say, I don't know if I'm a skill development guru or whatnot.
Well, I tell you what, it worked out.
Yeah,
So
no question.
your 4 years at Anderson, and now you mentioned it was a Christian college. And you said that was important to you. So, here on Paralysis, the Purpose of Podcast, we don't shy away from faith. And I'm a Christian and a devout one. But I have other people of other faiths on here to talk about their faith. Why was that important for you, that Anderson University was a Christian college?
Because I think ultimately at the end, I knew that the boat would not get too far from the anchor. I think. And I thought, if I go here, whatever the worst situation could happen in college, let's say I stray off the trail, and I'll eventually, the Christian structure at Anderson is going to help me find my way back.
Wow.
Through obviously God, but God being present in the people at the university is going to help me find my way back.
Well,
and I think,
wait, hold on. You said something that was a mouthful. You said God being present in the people at the university would help you stay structured, stay on task, and be there for you in the event that something happened. You didn't say God was going to come do it. You said that God and the people were going to come do it.
Absolutely. And I think God uses people I think that's his way of being present with us, is through the people. Mm-hmm. I think obviously he's with us in spirit, but I think the other way is through the people that he uses.
How did those people show up for you? And because I'm assuming, like you just said, that, we all have ups and downs and ins and outs and struggles and everything. And I still believe, and I say it a lot on this podcast, that there are people that are divinely appointed to be in particular times of your life for a season or whatever, just to help you during that time. What was that like for you, and how did they help you in some of your darkest moments? Yeah.
So it, growing up through high school, like I'd never, like I'd say, my dad was an alcoholic, so I had seen the effects that alcohol had, and I never really gotten into trouble in high school. The most I'd ever had was, maybe a lunch detention or something for crumbling up a piece of paper and using a ruler to play baseball in a class. So going to college, this is the first time I'm really sort of out on my own. And, and obviously being a part of a basketball team, a sports team, you're going to be around situations that, present downfalls. And I had, first semester, I kind of was fine, sort of getting the feel of college. Second semester comes, all right, I got the hang of this thing. The guys, we had just had a big win or something. Hey, we're going out for the night. Come on with us. I'm like, all right, we just won a big game. Let's go. And, that night was fun. Let's do it again next week. And as you get on that sort of downward spiral, and now you become entrenched in it. And it ended up becoming my second semester. I had second semester of my freshman year, and then sort of through the summer and then into my sophomore year and my junior year. And it ended up becoming so much to the point where I was going out every other night of the week to a house down the road that people would be partying at, or to the club in town. And it became so much where my grades had slipped, and coach brought me in, sat me down and said, "Look, you're gonna have to get something together. You're not going to be our manager anymore if this continues." And through some of those people, like we had security guards at the school we had been kind of tight with that said, "Hey, I saw a picture on the internet last night. You need to make sure, take that down. And if you're going to do that, like, don't be around that when you take a picture." And, different people. And it came to the point of my junior year. I had gotten to know this, campus minister had just started his first year, and I'd gotten to know him. He was young, Anderson. We didn't have football, so basketball was the front porch of the athletic program, biggest team on campus. And so he comes in, new campus minister, and obviously everyone kind of gravitates toward the basketball team. And I was, by my junior year, I'd become a pretty popular person on campus. So we gravitate toward each other, and he kept inviting me. Hey, we have campus worship Thursday nights. Come. And Thursday nights was actually college night at the club. So
I was going to say Thursday night on college campus is not Bible study night.
No, it is not worship night. It is. So I distinctly remember he invited me one night and said, "Hey, we're having a guest speaker come. Like, it's come." So I said, "All right, I'll come." And I came. I sat upstairs, and long story short, the speaker ended up talking about paying attention to the Spirit, kind of calling you home. Maybe you've never known God, and maybe you've walked away from God, and you've been living, sort of for yourself. And right at that instance, I knew, hey, he's talking to me. And I kind of slipped down on my chair, and I knew, like, man, he's talking to me. And but got up, left the worship event, and where did I go? I went out to college night, and the whole night at college night, I felt uneasy. I just said, I don't feel right. I called a friend that I had made that had actually come to Anderson to be a manager, quit 3 weeks in, and I made fun of. I said, "Man, what are you doing? Like, we're about to have a special year, and you're quitting to go be a part of campus worship, on the campus worship team." And full circle, I ended up calling him that night and said, "Hey, man, can you come pick me up? Like, I don't feel right." And he comes pick me up. We sat at Waffle House till 3 a.m. talking. And that was the beginning of me sort of turning the path of, of who I'm living my life for and the way I'm doing things.
Wow. Now, the irony is that Waffle House, for those who don't know, is not normally a place of transformation.
No. But at that time, it was the only place open.
But at that time, it was the only place open. Wow. Yeah. What a great story of you. And then, you going to the service, hearing something, and you're like, "Man, he's talking to me," but you're like, "Whatever, I'm going anyway." And you just couldn't shake because you knew it. No one had to tell you, no one had to, pump you or prime you. And you're like, "I got to get out." And you had someone that you knew. It's not that you just happened to have someone. You went to school with someone who was going to be a manager who opted out. And you were like, "You're crazy for doing that." And now he was still there for you.
One of my best friends to this day.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So you're in your junior year now. I mean, you've been managing, and you've now dealt with this problem that you had. What was this basketball like, man? I mean, what was it like?
You don't have to finish. We're going to the basketball route. It was the hardest, most rewarding, most challenging, most exciting time of my life. I could write. I saw our head coach a couple of weeks back at a recruiting event, and I said I could write a book about some of the things that we've done. And we came in, and Anderson had a little bit of success in their time, but not a whole ton. Wasn't a historical basketball program. As you know, Division II, and maybe some Division II doesn't offer full scholarships.
Right.
They offer, partial. So you kind of get your money from wherever else you are, and then the basketball program will come in. So obviously, we're not dealing with future NBA players by any means, but we had started to have turn things around. My freshman year, we had won a game over 500, and that was the first winning season they had in quite some time. My sophomore year, we broke through and made it to the NCAA tournament, won a game, and that was the first tournament appearance, I believe, in school history. And then the second, my junior year, we went to the Elite Eight. And if you know anything about Division II, the Elite Eight is the equivalent of the Final Four. We made the Elite Eight, and we got to go to the Hall of Fame in Springfield, Massachusetts. We played Augusta State down in Georgia, and they had like a close to 50-game home winning streak. Ended that, and they were the team that beat us out of the tournament the year before, so that was fun. Going up to Massachusetts and seeing the Hall of Fame, being a basketball guy, as you know, Coach, like you finally get to see sort of the mecca of all these names, and luckily by that point it had been a lot of the names I'd watched as a kid, and you just look up and everybody's in the wall like that you had watched, and you're walking by and seeing Shaq's shoes next to Jordan's headband or whatnot, and it was incredible. And then my senior year, we went again to the tournament, and we lost in the Sweet 16. So it was challenging, as in, I was the only man at Division II. We didn't have 8 managers as Division I. I was the only one. So I'm setting practice up, doing laundry, doing towels, coming back to the gym later that night to switch the laundry over, making sure everybody's jersey's out, helping coach with the meals, different, set up meals and hotels and things. And I'm doing all that, plus rebounding for the guys, getting to know the guys, and ended up being, obviously I still talk to most of our guys, and it was actually cool, and I'll blame him for it. So it doesn't look like I'm bragging on myself. He actually ended up giving me the nickname, the Glue, because he thought I held the team together.
As a coach, I used to almost envy the relationship that the players had with each other, because they were building bonds forever. And as a coach, you have relationship with your players, but it was a different kind of bond. And so for you to experience that and get to the NCAA tournament, people don't, look, getting to the NCAA tournament at any level is not easy. And it's a lot of work, and a lot of things have to go well. So kudos to you. I mean, the other part about your job as a manager, and it's the stuff that you don't see that really makes up most of what your job is. People see on game day and all, they think, oh, that's great. But you talked about doing laundry. I remember all that. And back then I was doing Gatorade and water bottles and doing that kind of stuff and coming back. And back then they had to go get the film from the airport and bring it back and all that kind of stuff. That was the work you did, but you loved it. Yeah. And you were willing to make a sacrifice. And so
absolutely.
You're now an assistant coach at Hargrave Military Academy. For those who don't know, that's one of the top prep organizations in the country. How did you get there, and how do you like it?
I got there. So when I was at Anderson one summer, there was a coach. He was a player at a rival school in the conference. I saw the rival player, recognized him. We hit it off, and he ended up. We stayed in touch, and then he graduated, and he actually had played at Hargrave before going to this rival school. And then when he graduated, he went back to Hargrave as an assistant. Well, him and I had stayed in touch, and he knew that, I had goals of kind of growing. And at this time I was coaching. I had left Anderson and come back to Greer to coach as an assistant at Greer High School. And I wanted something, more. I wanted to get back to the college level or a higher level. And he knew that. And he was an assistant at Hargrave and called me up and said, hey, we got a spot open. Do you want it? And I said, absolutely. And he said, well, come up. Coach wants you to interview and see if you get the job. Well, little did I know, he didn't want me to interview. The spot was mine. He just wanted to meet me and stuff.
Right.
And so that's how I got on to Hargrave. And this is where my journey sort of started to turn a little bit. And this was the time my mobility started to get started to go down. It had started the end of my college career a little bit, but I didn't really notice it. And, I think it's sort of being men, something little happens and we just sort of compromise. We fight through it. And little did I know, years I look back and I'm like, whoa, I should have noticed it then. Well, this was right about that time. And So anyway, I go up to Hargrave, he hires me and I get the job. And then, like I said, this was right about the time where my mobility got bad. And I went to a doctor and started to figure out some of the things that were going on with my spine and my back. But the Hargrave part to this day is incredible because you get to be around high level kids. And again, you get to see that impact of, kids that either maybe their grades weren't good enough and, they didn't think college was attainable to now you are, we had a kid going, he was going to be bound for JUCO, if not the streets of Atlanta. And he's in the SEC right now, probably, going to have a shot at the league in the next year or two. Wow. So it's, you get to be around high level kids and so that part of it. And I owe it all to Coach Lee Martin and Coach A.W. Hamilton of giving me the shot to be a part of their program.
Talk about this spinal issue that you had, because I remember seeing you in a wheelchair and I was like, I don't think he's in a wheelchair. So what was that about?
Yeah. So basically by this time I had, it started about the end of my college career where, growing up, as I said, I did everything. And even into college, like I'm playing intramural basketball about probably junior, maybe I think it was started my senior year. It was a slow fade, if you will. Mm-hmm. It basically ended up where like, instead of a full run, and I don't want to get into a development anatomy lesson here, but instead of a full run, it would sort of more look like I would have to gallop. And then the gallop turned into sort of having to, 1 foot, like I would have to kind of whip it around in front of the other. And again, I should have seen, hey, I'm not being able to run right. Something's wrong. Yeah. All I did was compromise. Nope, I'm fighting through it. No pain, I'm fighting through it. And then it became, where I couldn't do that anymore. And it started becoming painful just to walk. And it got so bad to the point of when I would walk, I was in a ton of pain. I would either have to hold on to someone's arm physically, or I would, what I call pinball, I would have to like hold on to walls and just hold on to the desk until lunge to the wall. And it ended up, I ended up having to, I was like, okay, finally, I said something's wrong. So I go to the doctor and I thought it was because being a little person, and I got to give you credit, Coach. You said little person. I don't know if you had heard that politically. That's the politically correct term. And so I got to give you a little kudos on that.
Thank you.
But I figured, well, hey, this is because my legs are bowed. Mm-hmm. It's a leg issue. My legs are the reason what's failing me. This is a leg issue. My legs are bowed. We'll get them straightened out. I'll be good to go. Well, I go into the doctor, and the doctor, and I'm sure as you can relate, the slightest movement exercise is the toughest. And he says, no, I don't think it's your leg. I want you to do one thing for me. I want you to flex your ankle. And Coach, for the life of me, I could not flex my ankle.
Wow.
And I said, why did you ask me to flex my ankle? He goes, this is a spine issue. And again, not to get into anatomy lesson, basically I had because of being a little person, I had congenital stenosis. So what had happened was your vertebrae are like this all the way down your back. Well, my vertebrae had narrowed to basically constrict and choke the nerves in my back. And it had become so painful that it was painful, one, and two, it had cut off all communication to my legs, basically, essentially rendering them useless.
Yeah.
So he says, and that refers me to a neurologist. Neurologist says, yeah, we got to go in and decompress. Well, basically decompress, meaning we're going to go relieve some of that pressure and carving some of the bone around your spine. And then what they ended up doing was they did that on so many levels of my spine that they had to fuse me because my spine would have become unstable. So at this time, I just get the Hargrave job, and then I'm finding out I'm going to have a spinal surgery. Thankfully, Coach Hamilton was super supportive, and those guys up there, they said, hey, go back home, have your surgery. We'll let you work from there. We'll figure it out when it comes time. So I go and I come down and have my surgery, and one of the I'll say, growing up, being a little person had its challenges for sure. The single hardest thing I've ever done is spinal surgery in the recovery. Is the single hardest thing I've ever done. And there were days in the hospital on the backside of the recovery where I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. And, but again, it's just kind of one of those that I talked about at the beginning, that competitor. And he's like, you're not going to let this, like, you're not going to give up that quick, that easy, and so ended up having the surgery and I spent a week in the hospital. Then they transferred me to a rehab hospital where I spent a month and a half. And at this time, I'm to the point where I'm just trying to make the best of, I'm Mr. Positive on the hall. I'm going into other people's room, encouraging them, hey man, you got therapy today. Get your butt in here.
Right.
And, I'm rocking therapy and you know what? And I'm basically, if this is going to be my new life, I'm going to learn to live with it. I'm going to learn to, I'm going to be okay with it. And there was definitely time, like I said, in the hospital where God's telling me like, hey man, if you don't ever walk again, you're going to be all right with it. And facing that reality is,
wow.
I got to, am I going to? And that's hard. And, but I think, and you know how it is when you were 15 and you all of a sudden are limited to a chair now, you have to rethink at everything you do. Everything you do, from getting into a car to and full transparency. I kind of have a little mantra of, if you're transparent, nobody can hold anything against you. One of the things people don't want to talk about when you're in a chair that is using the bathroom.
Yeah.
And it changes. Everything. Everything. And growing up a little person, I think helped me after my spinal surgery was because growing up a little person, you're already wired to think things differently in a world that's not made for you. You go up, an average person goes up to a chair and they don't think, they just turn and sit. A little person goes up and they think, all right, do I need to hold on to the table? Do I need to turn and climb up in the chair forward and then turn around and sit down? Well, how do I need to get in this chair? And my mind's already processed to, think differently. And so when I had my spinal surgery, you just had to think things differently. How do you get from your chair to your bed? Well, my arms are shorter. I might not be able to do a slide transfer with a sliding board because I can't reach the bed to hold on to. So what I would do is I would dive first in the bed and do a roll. That's how I got into my bed. And the therapist, I would shock them the heck out of them. But they finally were like, you know what? This is what's easy for you. And what I did was, and they would tell you, is I caused those therapists to have to think differently because they couldn't put me in a box. I wasn't a cookie cutter patient. And so being a little person helped me in the long run when I got out of my spinal surgery, because I was automatically wired to, hey, you got to do things differently.
And you caused the therapist to have to rethink what they were doing.
Absolutely.
Because what they knew didn't apply to you.
No, absolutely not. They did nothing apply because I wasn't an average size patient.
Right.
I wasn't, I couldn't reach the bed to do a sliding board transfer. They pulled out a sliding board the first day I was in the rehab hospital, said, let's work on a transfer. I said, this isn't going to work. I didn't even have to try it. I looked at him and said, this isn't going to work. And they're like, no, it'll work. And I'm like, no, I'm telling you, this is not going to work. And sure enough, that's what happened.
And they were going to try to convince you.
No question.
That it was going to work because of their own experience.
Absolutely.
And you're like, but no. Nope. I'm telling you, this is not going to work.
Absolutely.
Man, that right there is a lesson of lessons. Know yourself, know your limitations, know your strengths, know your weaknesses, and you take responsibility for your own life.
Absolutely.
And your own well-being, because your experience is the only one that can help you understand what you have to do.
100%. And
yes, it does.
Fortunately, I'm able to now, even when I was out, I guess now I'm what the doctor says is, limited, I think it's incomplete
Right.
para.
Yeah.
Incomplete para. So I can, like, when I'm small distances, when I go on a trip or something, I can use a walker and get around and things like that. But when I'm out in public, I use my chair just because it gives me a lot more freedom.
Yeah.
And obviously some people, when they're like, oh, you're in a chair, how are you free? Trust me, a
Mm.
lot more freedom.
Wow. Hold on to that, because that is a powerful statement that first of all, that story is amazing to me. And you have the ability to understand that there are things that you can use that others may think is a hassle or something that's going to be constricting, but it gives you freedom. It gives you the ability to function at another level. And man, for a coach, for people who don't get what you just told us in this story, you need to be active as a coach. You
Absolutely.
need to be able to get around. You have to be able to do things, and people have done it in chairs and have done it with crutches and things, but it's a task, to say the least. How did you and then we'll wrap it up with a couple other things, because this has been fabulous today. I was going to ask you, like, what was your darkest moment? Well, you told us. You're in that hospital, and this is even after having fallen into some drinking problems earlier. You were at a point where you were like, I don't know if I can do this. I've been there. I tell people all the time. I'm grateful that I've been able to continue on and do the things that I do. But have there been moments where you're just like, man, I don't feel like getting in this car.
No question.
I don't feel like getting out of this car.
Out of this car.
I got to get in the shower, and I got to get out the shower.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You're like, oh my goodness. Why do you keep going, man? Why do you keep going?
I think because I think it's twofold. I think one, because I think God has plans. I think God has purposes. And me not going, God's not, he'd go find someone else. But, why not be a part of what he's doing and writing? And the fact that I can sort of make him famous, and the fact of using someone like me who's limited and been through the things I've been through to, because people look, as being different early in life, people gravitate towards what's different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're going to have people's ear, and they're going to be more keen to listen. I think that's one. I think two, the impact you can have on kids, I think is why I couldn't see myself doing. People might call me stupid. I've been offered to, hey, come work in our office. What am I going to be doing? Sitting in a cubicle, typing on a computer all day? No, thanks. Oh man, it pays great. No, thanks. Why? I'm a coach. That's what I do. I'm a coach. I'm on the floor. And I think the impact of kids, because when you hear parents tell you, you rekindled my son's love for the game, or the most rewarding thing a parent can tell a coach is, hey, I would let you coach my son, and you can coach my son any day. When you hear parents tell you that, is when you're like, maybe I'm doing something. Maybe I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And you see your former players go on to have success at next levels, or go on to be successful parents, and whatever they end up doing. I think those are the reasons why to keep going.
Yeah, there's nothing like living long enough to get the feedback. Not living forward, but living long enough to get it back. And because some people don't ever get it.
Yeah.
Some people never tell you thank you. Some people never tell you how much they appreciate what you've done. But when they do, man, that's worth $1 million. Now, what they need to do is hit up your Cash App.
Absolutely, they need to hit that up. Absolutely,
And
I
drop
need to
these,
drop. When I give you the information, then I'm gonna put that one in there too.
and so that they can sow into your life and say
Yeah,
thanks. On Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast, because we have to finish now, and then I have to finish because I have to do another podcast. Otherwise, we keep talking. Because you've had a great career. What's next for you?
My goal is I want to get back to the college level or the NBA. I want to, and whatever that looks like, I want to be able to impact people at the highest level I can. And now again, if that's running Upward Stars program one day, then let's do it. But as far as goals, I would love to be back at the college level because those college years were the most formative for me, and or the professional level, because that's when you really get to get in the day-to-day mud of life with your players. And to me, I can draw up a stagger set for you right now and X and O terminal and game-winning basket right now, and that'd be great. But the best thing I love about coaching is when you get to come in and put your arm around a guy and say, "Hey, man, how was that test today?
Yeah.
What's going on with that girlfriend you mentioned? You haven't been yourself. What's going on with that?" Or, "Hey, man, your mom passed away last week. Let's talk about that."
Yeah.
Or even, "Hey, man, your dad's struggling with alcohol. Well, let me tell you this. I've been there. Been there, and this is how we got through. Hey, man, your mom's and your aunt's in the hospital. Well, hey, man, I spent a month and a half in the hospital. I can, and I think that part, being able to relate to your players, getting in the down and the dirty with them, I think is what I love the most. And I couldn't foresee myself doing anything different.
People often ask me, how can I make a difference? Tell your story.
Absolutely.
That everybody has some part of their story that is designed for someone else. I don't believe that our stories are for ourselves. I think they are to be told for others to hear. On that note, you need to write a book. But I'm just saying, I'm just saying.
You are the first one to tell me that.
Yeah.
I might have to get with you about a publisher.
Yeah, well, yeah. Okay, you can get with me about a publisher, and I'll tell you about writing a book.
Yeah.
So now look, there are three things we talk about on Paralysis to Purpose. We talk about the importance of perspective, we talk about partnerships, and we talk about perseverance. And so before we end, I'm going to ask you, as I do each guest, what comes to mind, and we'll start off with this word here. When you hear the word perspective.
So I think what you just said was the thing we all need to do is everybody has a story. And I think among that is people always want to hear stories. And to answer your question, perspective, I'm going to tell you the story of when I was in the hospital. And this is what God told me about perspective was I thought I was going to be in the hospital a couple of days and I was going to be right back. This surgery was going to put me right back to what I was before surgery. I'm going to be running, jumping, doing everything. And this was when I was in the main hospital, wearing a hospital gown, still have my wound vac. And I hear, I don't know, I'm in the bed one day and I hear these clicking heels coming down the hall one day. And my door swings open and this woman with a white coat on, I call her Heidi Klum to this day, but she had like the biggest earrings, the most bizarre colored dress on. And she says, "Hi, my name is Dr. Robbins and I'm from Roger Peace Rehab Hospital." And I said, "I want to talk to you about coming to rehab hospital when they clear you to leave this floor." And I literally told her, I'm not kidding. I told her, "I'm not interested. Thanks, though." And she said, "No, but I think you need to just hear me out." I said, "All right, I'll hear you out. But I'm telling you, I'm not interested. I'm going home after this." And she said, she went on to tell me you coming to our rehab hospital will change everything about when you go home, when you're finally able to make it home, being able to do the things you do and as normal as possible. And what that taught me about perspective was I only saw the near sight. I only saw, hey, I'm going home after this. She saw months from now, years from now.
Perseverance.
Perseverance, I think, is just keep going, is keep fighting on. And again, to tell you another story is, in rehabbing, they tell you, hey, you're going to walk from here to the end of the hall today. And then you get halfway down the hall and you're like, I want to drop out. And they've got that gate belt on you. And I know I'm speaking, like they got that gate belt on you and they're sliding behind you in a chair. And you're like, well, I'm either going to be in this floor or I'm going to persevere to that chair at the end of the hall and get there. And I think just persevering is fighting through whatever's coming your way. I think it's, I think just being able to sort of pick yourself up at your bootstraps, keep going. And I think, the Bible says perseverance brings hope, hope brings character. Mm-hmm. And I think being able to persevere goes back to who you are and what your anchor is.
Yeah.
And I think I think if you have a hope, have something at the end that you know is coming, I think you'll be able to persevere a lot more. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing as championship teams persevere through those dog days of the summer, through the dog days of, January, I'll just throw it there, January 31st practice in a college season. Guys are like, it ain't quite March yet. We're in the dog days of conference. It's a hard day to come to practice. But if you know that cutting the net down is in Greensboro or wherever the Final Four is that year, that's ahead, you're going to persevere.
I love to tell people as long as there's time on the clock, you can impact the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
You must finish the game. Lastly, let's talk about the importance of partnerships.
I think partnerships are key. I think God designed the world to live in partnerships and community with people. I don't think we're supposed to go at this thing alone. And I think whether that be, a team, I think whether that be friends that you can call at 3 a.m. to take you to Waffle House, I think, whatever that is, I think that partnerships, team, people around you, community is essential, because there's going to be people that pick you up on the days you don't feel like picking yourself up. And I'll tell a quick story is here too is, one of my really good friends, he has a brother that has Asperger's. And every time I see his brother, I always talk to him. I'll joke around with him, cut up with him and things like that. And his brother's kind of in a place right now where he just graduated high school and, he's kind of trying to figure out what's next. And obviously people with intellectual limitations don't have maybe as many options. Well, there's a program in our state that a university has where he could potentially pursue. And I've been challenging my friend, like, hey, he's got to go do this. He's got to go do this. He's got to go do this. And they ended up telling him, like, hey, like, Dave suggested, it might be something to look at. And my friend calls me the other day and says, we had to sit down and talk with my mom and my brother. And we ended up telling him, like, hey, you suggested this. And he said he ended up jumping up, putting it on his phone calendar when the sign-up date was. And I say all that to say, like, you never know the impact you're going to make of having community around you. Mm. And those are the people that, like, my friend impacts me, I end up impacting his brother. That's the partnership, I think, that is key and essential, because, again, like, I don't think we're made to go through life alone.
Well, David, this has been a really good podcast. And I want to thank you for sharing your journey with us, the ups, the downs, the successes, the struggles, the failures, and the best is yet to come for you.
Absolutely.
And I hope you understand that. If people do want to follow you, what's the best way for them to follow you on social media?
They can. I have Twitter. I have Instagram. I'm on Facebook. My Twitter and Instagram name DAV Bentley BENTLEY DAV Bentley, all one word. Those are both my Twitter and Instagram, and then my Facebook name is just David Bentley, and people can find me there.
I hope our listeners will take the time to connect with you and follow you. And if you're a former player and you're listening, a former parent and you're listening, and I hope you are, get his Cash App, his Venmo, Zelle, whatever the mechanism is, and sow into his life. He would never ask you this. And the older I get, the more I love giving. And accolades are great, but hit him off a little something. Oh, okay. Well, hey, David, thank you so much for your time today. And until the next episode of Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast, this is David Cooks reminding you that your ability to endure is always greater than your willingness to endure.
You can do anything you put your mind to.
Thanks for tuning in to Paralysis to Purpose. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Paralysis to Purpose on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. To purchase his book, visit davidcookspeaks.com. Be sure to tune in next time for more inspiring conversations with David Cooks.
I knew something serious had happened. I can't explain it, but I just got this feeling that something really bad had just happened to me. And I go to try to get up, and I'm trying to move any muscle in my body, and nothing's working. So the thought goes through my head, oh my gosh, I just paralyzed myself. And then I'm thinking about the talk that my dad had with me right before he dropped me off. And I'm like, this cannot be happening. This is a dream.
Next time on Paralysis to Purpose.
Zach Colley, welcome to the podcast.
I start to realize this is not a dream. This is reality. And I'm going to die at 15.
Paralysis to purpose.